double genius. But what if that praise, that warm Hollywood applause everyone keeps repeating, is actually hiding something far more unsettling underneath it? What if the real story between Jim Carrey and Keanu Reeves isn't just about two legends finally meeting after 30 years, but about a collision of two completely different realities inside Hollywood's most carefully controlled illusion? Because here's where it gets strange. For 3 decades, Jim Carrey and Keanu Reeves existed in the same Hollywood universe. Same premieres, same red carpets, same industry circles, same decades of fame, scandal, transformation, silence, reinvention, and yet almost no real contact. Not friendship, not collaboration, just distance. A strange, almost unnatural distance between two men everyone assumed would have crossed paths countless times. And then, suddenly, out of nowhere, December 2024 happens. Sonic the Hedgehog 3. One franchise. Two giants. Jim Carrey returning as the chaotic, unhinged brilliance of Dr. Robotnik. Keanu Reeves stepping in as the voice of Shadow, the dark, almost mythic anti-hero. On paper, it looks like perfect Hollywood synergy. But behind the surface, something else is forming, something quieter, something almost suspicious in its timing. We didn't work in the same space, Jim Carrey admits, a simple sentence. But it lands like a clue dropped in the middle of a mystery. No shared set, no direct interaction during filming, just voices, performances, fragments stitched together by production magic. And yet, somehow, both men start talking about each other like they've discovered something rare, something almost unsettlingly pure in an industry built on performance. Then Keanu speaks, and the temperature shifts. He's very kind, he's very generous. It speaks to his beautiful heart. Beautiful heart. Not the language Hollywood usually uses for Jim Carrey. Because let's be honest, the myth around Jim Carrey is not simple. It never has been. He's been called unpredictable, extreme, method-obsessed, emotionally explosive, a man who disappears into roles so deeply that people around him sometimes struggle to find where the performance ends and the person begins. But Keanu Reeves, the man known for silence, humility, and almost unnerving sincerity, isn't reacting to rumors. He's reacting to what he personally witnessed. And that's where the tension starts building. Because suddenly we're not dealing with Hollywood gossip anymore. We're dealing with two opposing reputations colliding in real time. Jim Carrey calls Keanu Reeves the man every man aspires to be. A statement so clean, it almost feels too perfect, too controlled, too carefully phrased for someone like Jim Carrey, or maybe exactly honest enough to be dangerous in its simplicity. And yet here's the contradiction that no one in Hollywood seems able to resolve. How does a man like Jim Carrey, surrounded for decades by stories of chaos, intensity, emotional extremes, and career-defining unpredictability, end up being described by Keanu Reeves with words like kindness and generosity? Because that's not the public image most people carry. That's not the internet narrative. That's not the footage people remember from interviews, from talk shows, from the moments where Jim Carrey blurred the line between performance and something much harder to define. And this is where the story starts to fracture into something bigger. Because if Keanu Reeves is telling the truth, and Keanu Reeves has built an entire reputation on being painfully, almost suspiciously honest, then what exactly have we been seeing all these years? A performer losing himself in the role of Jim Carrey? Or a man who has been misunderstood because he refuses to separate performance from reality in the way everyone expects? And the deeper you go into this pairing, the stranger it becomes. Two men who barely crossed paths for 30 years, suddenly connected through a single film. Two men who represent opposite energies in Hollywood silence and chaos, restraint and explosion, stillness and constant motion, suddenly speaking about each other like mirrors instead of opposites. But here's the part nobody can quite explain yet. Why now? Why, after decades of distance, does this connection finally form in a Sonic movie of all places? Why does Keanu Reeves, of all people, become the one describing Jim Carrey not as a legend, not as a comedian, not as a performer, but as something far more personal? But the more you look at this connection, the more it stops feeling like a simple Hollywood friendship and starts feeling like a collision between two completely different versions of reality. Because Keanu Reeves didn't just casually compliment Jim Carrey during a press tour, he didn't just repeat polite industry praise, he anchored his words in something far more specific, something observed, fact, something lived in real time inside that Sonic 3 world where both men existed in parallel but never actually touched the same space. And that detail alone is what makes everything feel slightly off. Because Hollywood is full of scripted admiration, but it is extremely rare for someone like Keanu Reeves to lean into emotional certainty about another actor unless something real has been witnessed behind the curtain. And suddenly the narrative shifts, because if Keanu saw kindness and generosity, then what exactly has the rest of the world been reacting to all these years when they watched Jim Carrey move through chaos, reinvention, and controversy like a man constantly stepping in and out of himself? Because the deeper history is not quiet, it is not simple, and it is definitely not clean. Jim Carrey's name has lived through decades of myth-making that no publicist could fully control. The stories always start the same way: brilliance, then intensity, then unpredictability that bends every set he enters into something slightly unstable. And nowhere does that reputation become more amplified than Man on the Moon, the role where Jim Carrey didn't just act, he dissolved. Crew members later described a set where the line between performance and identity didn't just blur, it collapsed entirely. He wasn't Jim Carrey playing Andy Kaufman, he was Andy Kaufman, and that decision reportedly turned the production into something no one fully understood while it was happening. Even the director Milos Forman, a legend in his own right, reportedly reached moments of exhaustion trying to separate reality from performance, as if the film itself was being swallowed by its own subject. And yet that same chaos, the same intensity that made people uncomfortable, is also what created some of the most unforgettable footage Hollywood has ever tried to lock away from public perception for years. The behind-the-scenes material that later surfaced wasn't just acting, it was immersion taken to an extreme that made even seasoned actors like Paul Giamatti describe the experience with visible discomfort, recounting moments that felt less like performance and more like someone refusing to step out of character, no matter what it cost the environment around them. And that's where the contradiction begins to form. Because how does someone capable of that level of creative extremity also get described decades later as gentle, generous, almost spiritually grounded by someone like Keanu Reeves? It doesn't fit neatly. Nothing about Jim Carrey ever does. Then there are the other fragments, the talk show moments where he shifts tone mid-interview, the Kimmel appearance where he gestures toward conspiracy, Illuminati symbolism, hidden truths, speaking in a way that left audiences unsure whether they were watching comedy, breakdown, or performance art designed to confuse interpretation itself. And instead of becoming smaller over time, those moments accumulate, building a public image that feels less like a biography and more like a puzzle missing its final image. And now Keanu Reeves enters that same puzzle decades later, not as an outsider reacting to rumors, but as someone who stood close enough to observe the man behind the noise. And Keanu's reputation matters here, because he is one of the few figures in Hollywood whose sincerity is almost never questioned. He doesn't inflate stories, he doesn't exaggerate encounters, he doesn't feed mythology for attention. So when he describes Jim Carrey in terms of emotional clarity rather than chaos, it doesn't erase the contradictions, it intensifies them, because suddenly you are left with two parallel narratives that refuse to merge cleanly. One version of Jim Carrey is built from decades of extreme artistic commitment, emotional volatility, public unpredictability, lawsuits, spiritual reinvention, withdrawal from fame, and explosive returns. The other version is a man seen by Keanu Reeves at close range, described in simple human terms that feel almost too grounded for the mythology surrounding him. And that is where the tension now lives, not in scandal, not in confirmation, but in contradiction that refuses to resolve. Because if both versions are true, then Jim Carrey is not just a performer or a personality, he is something far more unstable in definition, a man who can exist simultaneously as chaos and calm depending entirely on who is standing close enough to look at him without the noise. And maybe that is why this connection feels so unsettling to people. Because Keanu Reeves didn't expose a secret, he exposed a possibility that the story was never as fixed as the public believed. And once that idea enters the conversation, it doesn't leave cleanly. It lingers, it grows, and it quietly asks a question that Hollywood never fully answers. Which version of Jim Carrey is the real one? And who exactly gets to decide when both seem to exist at the same time?